correct. It's that time, you silly geese. Time for Crossing the Streams, your entertainment, lunchable, video games, television, movies, all things that are better than your actual regular everyday life. Let's get after it.
Video games.
Brian Shea, my guy, associate editor for Game Informer at Brian P. Shea on Twitter, joins me on the Mitsubishi Electric Heating Hotline. Brian, it's a pleasure. How are you?
Good. How are you, man?
Excellent. Nintendo comes out and does what Nintendo does. They announce a new console. I feel like every 6 months I whip around and they got a new thing they're peddling to play their video games on. Do we have any more details on what they're actually doing here?
Not really, aside from the fact that it's codenamed NX, which could mean pretty much anything at this point. They're saying that we're going to hear official word about next year sometime, so we don't really have much to go off of, but the name itself is kind of interesting because in a lot of Japanese games, X stands for cross, and there's been a lot of speculation to this point that Nintendo would be releasing a crossover system, which would be a handheld and a home entertainment system in one. So kind of like the 3DS that exists right now, you can take it on the go, do whatever you want with it, and then come home and plug it into the TV and play it right there. I mean, obviously we don't have any hard details about that, but the name itself and the code name kind of lends to that rumor that's been going around for a little bit about them.
Brian, as someone that's somewhat punched out on Nintendo but still has an affinity for all the characters and loves, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, and all that, but just the Wii U is not for me, and the Wii, I got out of that just because it was just not conventional. What do you make of where Nintendo is right now? Clearly they can still sell systems. Clearly they have brands and tent poles that people care about, but the real question is, are we anywhere closer to them making those brands available to third parties?
I don't think we're going to see that at any point in the near future, at least. I think that, they've had a couple of systems. Like the Wii sold out like crazy when it first hit.
Yeah.
The Wii U has slowly been picking up some momentum after a really rough launch. I think we're still a few lesser selling consoles away from having them even consider that. They're very protective over their first-party brands. We're starting to see them branch out a little bit to allow other developers to make their games. Like we saw them do a Zelda game that wasn't developed by Nintendo for the first time last year with Hyrule Warriors. But I think that we're still a ways away before we see anything from Nintendo like on an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Did I see that they're going to be the part of this is probably going to be them getting heavily into making mobile games for the iPhone and the tablet?
Yeah, that's something that they kind of backtracked on yesterday. In 2011, Satoru Iwata, the president of Nintendo, he just completely shot down the idea. He said stuff like, the moment we do that is the moment Nintendo ceases to be Nintendo, which, that's a pretty strong statement from the president of the company. And then, 4 years later, they're announcing, hey, we're partnering with Dana Games to put out mobile games, and they're still going to be the lead development people. Nintendo's still going to be handling all the development tasks, but this company, Dana, which is they're behind games like Paper Toss and Star Wars Galactic Defense, and they're putting out a Final Fantasy game on mobile. They're going to be kind of there consulting with them, with pricing structure, because not all of them are going to be like free to play where you have to pay microtransactions and things like that. So Nintendo's still going to be doing the grunt work, but Dana is going to be there kind of saying, all right, well, for mobile games, we found that this works really well, and kind of holding their hand as they make this transition to mobile.
You can follow Brian on Twitter at Brian P. Shea. Battlefield Hardline. This is a different direction for this franchise. The cops and robbers stuff intrigues me. I'm still one of these archaic old-timers that likes a nice campaign in the games that I'm buying. It doesn't look like that I'm going to get much of that here. What can we expect from this thing?
Well, it does have a campaign in it, like a single-player campaign where you play kind of like Renegade Cop. It starts out kind of serious and then just delves into the ridiculous, kind of like a campy police drama show. But obviously with Battlefield, the focus is always going to be multiplayer.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the multiplayer is a much better attraction in this game than the single-player is. So I know that the guy who's reviewing it for us isn't exactly loving the single player, but he seems to be enjoying the multiplayer. And there's some pretty crazy modes, like there's capture the flag, only instead of a flag, it's a car. So you can drive the car around, you can try to disable the car while somebody else is driving it, and they have passengers shooting at you, and it can get pretty intense and pretty fast paced. So they're definitely trying some new things with the franchise, and I'm excited to play it myself, but I do have my questions.
Gotcha. It sounds like they're stressing multiplayer as always. Brian, always a pleasure. Thank you for making the time today for Crossing the Streams.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. At Brian P. Shea, give him a follow. Let's go over to the Magic Box.
TV.
I'm lucky I can still book this guy. Every time I turn around, he's on a bigger show. He's on Kevin and Bean, and I also saw that he was on with Chris Jericho, and I'm seething with jealousy. My buddy Matt Fowler from IGN.com joins me at the Matt Fowler on Twitter. Fowler, what's up, bud?
Hey, how you doing, man?
I was interacting with Y2J. That sounds pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. I was just interviewing him myself. I didn't actually get to be on his podcast.
Okay.
That's still a dream of mine.
Yeah, I mean, I can stomach you interviewing him. That's still really cool. But if he booked you as a guest, I just would be consumed by my jealousy. Before we get into any of that stuff, this Unbreakable show, I talked about it yesterday. It's on Netflix, and just the way that it's described, it's nothing that I think most people would think I would enjoy. I wouldn't think that I would enjoy it, but it's so funny, and it's so over the top, and it's so fast. How did it come about? I thought I read someplace that it was supposed to be on television, and then it got canceled or something and ended up on Netflix. How is it being received?
I think it's being received really well. Yeah, it was developed for NBC. It's from Tina Fey and Robert Carlock, who also created 30 Rock, and of course she starred on that show for NBC. It was supposed to actually be a mid-season show for NBC, and things were stalling a bit, and they just said, hey, can we shop it around somewhere else? And they went to Netflix with it, and Netflix scooped it up, and not only did they take it, but they instantly picked it up for a second season before the first one even aired. But yeah, I think it's great. And it's also, when you think about how dark the subject matter really is, with the apocalypse cult and kidnapping and all that, and how funny they wind up making it, it's actually kind of miraculous.
It's an amazing show, and there's not much on it like it that I've seen on television, so I hope it's getting its due diligence. This is a question that I ask all the time, and since this is your gig, I'd love to ask you about it. The impact of all this stuff showing up on demand, showing up on on Hulu, showing up on Amazon Prime and Netflix, where these shows are not only being recognized there, but they're winning awards and they're getting as much credibility as Marvel's doing business with Netflix now with their Daredevil show. What do you think ultimately the impact of that is going to be on television?
I don't know if it's going to be even in our generation, but at some point in the future, everything's going to be a la carte. You can see that now even with HBO offering its own standalone streaming service. But I don't know. It's sure making for a busy schedule because Netflix especially has ramped up its original series, slate this year. We just talked about Kimmy Schmidt. They've got another new series starting this Friday called Bloodline. And then in 2 weeks after that, they've got Daredevil, which is coming out the same weekend Game of Thrones premiere. So it's really flooding the market. And if there were bad shows, it would be an issue. But they're all, the track record is pretty good. So we're actually getting sort of an avalanche of really good stuff.
Yeah, when that Daredevil show comes out, it's going to coincide with the removal of all pants I have and throwing them in a bonfire in my front yard. The WrestleMania, how it's fleshing out. I love the way they brought Sting in. Are you surprised at all he's as over as he is, that there's so many little tweens and children in the audience of a WWE show now, and Sting's getting gigantic responses? As a longtime fan and a fan of the WCW and the Monday Night Wars, it warms the cockles of my heart, but I didn't know if it would necessarily go that way.
I think that there are more. I don't know what the ratio of the crowd is for like the split for who recognizes him and appreciates him and who doesn't. But I know those who do are really loud, and they're a lot louder probably than kids who might not know quite who he is. So he's getting good reactions, and I did like seeing him come out, and actually sort of throw down on this past Monday's Raw. I think that we needed Sting being ominous and looming, and we also needed to see him in action. So I think we've gotten both of those scenarios, and I think I think we really needed that heading into the match.
Yeah, I would agree, and I can't wait for it. I mean, there's so many matches that I'm looking forward to. The IC ladder match, and of course seeing The Undertaker and Bray Wyatt. But that one's going to be incredible. It's at the Matt Fowler on Twitter. Must follow, and IGN.com. Matt, thank you very much, bud.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Anytime you're welcome here on Crossing the Streams. Let's head to the silver screen.
Movies.
Ethan Anderton, who I always enjoy having here versus the world. He's the managing editor for firstshowing.net. He is my guest. Now, Ethan, I want to preface this by saying I'm a huge fan of Liam Neeson pistol whipping guys and chasing down loved ones and threatening in his gruff voice. I like all of it, and I'm not a snob. I can watch it over and over again, but his last, 8 movies have all kind of contextually been, if not the same, very, very similar. Why do you think that is? Do you think it has something to do with the trauma that he had with his marriage? Is he just looking for a payday? We've seen guys like De Niro kind of go down this road in their career before. And how many more of these movies do you think he has left in him?
I mean, it could be a little mix of, some problems in his personal life and just, finding movies that work and bringing in an audience. There's no doubt, he wanted to do something different with Taken, and it was a surprise hit. And, when the studio finds that they have something that get audiences in theaters, they'll milk it as long as they can. That's why we got 3 Taken movies, even though I still think the first one's the only real good one. And, Liam Neeson found a good niche as being, an older actor who became this, action star, and he did Unknown and Nonstop. But, yeah, it's been a mixed bag of how many of them have actually worked. I haven't seen Run All Night yet, so I can't speak as to how good that is. But when he was promoting this movie, he actually said that he's probably only got about 2 more years of these kind of movies in him, and then he'll probably start focusing on other stuff, which I think is fine because I feel like we've run the gamut of all the action thrillers that Liam Neeson can do at this point.
Yeah, but in his defense, I don't mind. People seem to get really mad when actors do things for a paycheck, and I've never understood that. We all do things for a paycheck, and we all do things probably at times we'd rather not do for a paycheck. And I'm not talking about prostitution. I just mean in a normal job. And if Liam Neeson's like, look, they're paying me a bunch of money. These are easy to do. People seem to like them. What's the harm in it? I kind of understand that argument.
No, for sure. It's like, I mean, we all have jobs. We all, want to make money. He found something that works. He took advantage of it. For me, I place the blame, on the studios for putting forth these kind of action thrillers where maybe the story isn't as good as it could be. And, Liam Neeson's kind of just along for the ride for some of them.
The lead up to the new Star Wars movie, a lot of nerds are pissed off because I guess they announced that they're going to do books, and I guess there's books coming out, and it's going to be what happened in between Return of the Jedi and Force Unleashed, and there are already quite a few books that I guess aren't going to matter now. Do we know how they're going to handle that? Is it just the written word? Is there going to be television shows? What are they going to do to kind of bridge that gap?
Well, back when they announced the new Star Wars trilogy was happening, Lucasfilm kind of did a retcon with all of the expanded universe stuff that had already been released. So all the comic books, the various forms of media that we saw up until now are all being called Star Wars Legends. They're not what are considered canon. However, beginning with Star Wars Rebels and moving on through everything from now on, and that includes comic books, any TV series, video games, all that stuff, anything that has to deal with Star Wars will be considered canon. And so this new series of books is kind of a way of just, I think, getting more people interested in Star Wars, especially younger kids who may not necessarily have a big idea of the original trilogy, maybe weren't even old enough to see the prequels in theaters, but maybe got into Star Wars through the Clone Wars animated series. Oof. And so these books are just going to fill in just a little bit of the gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, but it's not really good. I don't think it's going to give away a whole lot of what we can expect from the movie.
I mean, that's fine. I just feel bad for kids like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you look at it, when you talk about how successful the Avengers universe is and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, do we even know what to expect from Star Wars? It's just so beloved and so universally embraced because they were movies. I mean, you're not coming from a comic book now, which people kind of had some preconceived notions about and looked down their nose upon and had to be convinced otherwise. These Star Wars movies have just grossed millions and millions of dollars throughout their existence. Do you think that the success, if handled the correct way, could even dwarf what Marvel has accomplished?
I mean, and Star Wars was huge for Marvel Studios ever was. But obviously it hit some bumps, when George Lucas came back to do the prequels. But yeah, it's a little hard to say what we can expect from Star Wars, but there's no doubt whatsoever that Disney has huge plans to keep building the galaxy into being just as big as Marvel Studios has created for their cinematic universe. So starting with Episode 7 is just the beginning of Lucasfilm and Disney's plan to release one Star Wars movie a year. The Force Awakens comes in December, and then December of 2016 will be the first spin-off, which is now called Star Wars Rogue One, and will be directed by Looper director Rian Johnson. So it's just the beginning of something that's going to be absolutely massive and hopefully be a good thing for Star Wars fans.
It's at Ethan_Anderton. Follow him on Twitter there and check him out on firstshowing.net. Always a pleasure, sir. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, Chad.
That's right. It's the best 12 minutes of your week on CDVTW.
Crossing the streams every Wednesday on Chad Dukes versus the World.